Okay. Hopping on here. All right.
Hopping on.
Yeah, so we were ready to record about 5 minutes ago, but...
We got the giggles. I call it the Friday sillies.
Yeah, the problem is you probably have that Monday through Sunday.
Maybe.
But that's what's so great about you, Krista. You're
Thank
so much
you.
fun.
Oh.
Yes. Well, hey, what are we talking about today? This is fun because, and I think it's fun because it's helpful. And don't you think things that are helpful are fun?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, things that are not helpful really blow.
Yeah.
And so.
But I love practical advice. You know,
Right.
like practical input, ways of looking at things. It just makes my life easier.
And it's all about
me.
Right. Kind of our joke here is that life is always about me.
Sometime we should do a podcast about humor. I know we did before.
Yeah, it
right.
was one of our first ones.
We have to do a reprise then.
We do. In fact, my daughter just took a psychology class on, I think, humor and the role of humor in psychology. So
brilliant.
Maybe I need to have my daughter on the show. She
that would be
cracks me
awesome.
up. She is hilarious. She's
That would
got
be
a
so
great
fun.
sense of humor.
Okay,
She's
I'm
got
in. Let's do
perfect
it.
timing. Yeah.
She's booked.
All right. So, now she's stressed out if she's listening to this.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Hey, what we're going to talk about today is pretty relevant, and I think it really relates to our company's mission.
Ooh.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, the mission that we have chosen to accept.
Yes.
Whether we like it or not.
I was going to say, Brett, what is the mission?
Yes. No, I know it really well because it really resonates with me. And our mission is to empower people to become the best version of themselves. I love that because
I do too.
As a therapist, what absolutely blows about my job is when I feel it's my responsibility to fix somebody or it's my responsibility to make their life better. And
right.
I like this because when we said that we're to empower, it takes the responsibility that I erroneously put on myself where it needs to be on the client.
There you go.
And so I love my job then because they do all the work and I get paid for it. So it is a lot.
Easy.
I'm just kind of sitting there. No, it really is. It's inspiring, I think.
I think so.
To empower people. I don't want to give advice. I don't want people to be dependent upon me. I want them to realize that they can empower themselves, that this is their life and they get to determine how they're going to live it.
I love that because then you're not fostering a sense of dependency on your therapist or on anyone, right? Right.
Yeah, we don't want that. And it's really fun to watch therapy be successful because I liken it to here in Minnesota when someone's stuck in the snow, I like to kind of push, my sons and I, we'd go out and push and push and push and there's no traction for a bit. And then suddenly they get a little bit of grab and all of a sudden there's hope.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to get them up. We got to just keep working on this. And then they keep hitting the gas. They keep putting in forward, reverse, back and forth. And we're empowering them. And then when they have that real sense of empowerment, what do? They dare not stop in the snow. I might get stuck again.
Yep.
So what I love is now that they're empowered, they just keep going and they wave out the window like, hey, thanks. And then they're on their way where they need to go. And that's what I love about our mission statement. And we are really empowering people. Now, I like that because really people come to therapy for what? They come for change.
Yes.
We talk about it in our mission statement. We want to empower people towards what? To become their best version of themselves. In other words, for change.
Yes.
So people come to therapy.
For change.
For change.
Yes.
Very good. Yes. And so that's all well and good. The difficulty is people don't want to change.
Yes. Change is difficult.
Right. And think about it. They say they want to change. I say I want to change.
Same.
But I really don't.
Well, and it's like, at what cost?
Right, yeah. I'm all for, losing weight.
Right.
But if, I still want to have pizza 5 nights a week.
Or do I have to get up early?
Yeah, right.
It's like, well, I'll do that, but not if it's this, or this, right?
Correct.
But maybe I haven't tried those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people come to therapy because they want change, but they really don't want it. Otherwise, they would have changed already.
Yes.
And the fact that they haven't means that they really don't want it. So what does that mean? When we come to therapy, we're saying we're all in, we really want to change. And sometimes it's simply because I don't know what I don't know. I don't have insight. I don't have skills. I need resources. Okay.
For sure.
And then even when people get that, there still can be this resistance to change.
Yep.
I just don't want to. And so that's where our role is really crucial. I tell my staff, you guys are leaders.
Yep.
As therapists, you are leaders. You are leading people towards change by empowering them when they really don't want it.
Sure.
And that's a really difficult thing. So what we're doing then is we're overcoming this sense of resistance, or some people call it willfulness, towards change. Like, I'm full of my will, and I'm willful towards this idea of change. I'm resisting it now. I want it, and I don't know if I want it.
Yep. So it's like resistance, and from what you're saying, it sounds like a little bit of uncertainty sometimes. Like, I want it, but I'm not sure I want it.
Right. Or as you said, I'm not sure I want to put in what it takes.
Yes, what's required. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So this sense of resistance, this willfulness is another way to put it. It makes sense. Okay. So we get it as therapists, and we go through it ourselves. There are things in our lives we wish we could change. That's why I think a good therapist goes to therapy too. Yep. And we don't want it, and we're stuck, and we resist it. Okay. Yep. And we have this, you kind of alluded to it, getting up early. Like, every morning, I have a lot of willfulness towards getting up, especially working out. Yep. I really don't have time. I don't have time. I need more sleep.
Yeah. Right. I can't.
So, we come up with all these reasons why we're going to be willful and resistant.
Even though we're saying, I want A, B, or C, or I want this to happen, we're saying, on the other hand, but I can't. Like, I have all these, it's too hard, right?
Yes. And so I think what's really important is people come in then and they blame themselves. They're upset. I should do better. I should be beyond this. Yeah. I shouldn't be, they wouldn't say this, I don't think overtly, I shouldn't be resistant, but they will say things like, I should be better, or I shouldn't be so deficient in some way. Yep. And we want to start with validation in therapy and say, it makes sense. Yeah. Why would you want to give up frozen pizzas on Fridays and things? And why wouldn't you want to sleep in longer? That totally makes sense.
Right. Good point.
So maybe we can talk about how this shows up in therapy, kind of normalize it, because the things I read, we go through as therapists. Everybody does. Yep. But it's important to sort of identify this, what willfulness or resistant looks like, and then how do we overcome this? We just had a staff meeting talking about this because, I don't know about you, I went to a really good grad school in Chicago area and really enjoyed it. And I supervise other therapists, and I asked them, how many classes have you had that talk about resistance and overcoming resistance? And overwhelmingly,
not that many
talked about, but that's the heart of, and the crux of therapy is confronting that
resistance. Yes.
And thank you. Confronting the resistance in a way that we're not alienating clients, we're actually empowering them. So it's a bit of art. So let's take a look at what willfulness looks like. Okay. So one of the ways it comes up is that people, they just don't care enough to change.
Okay. Like, basically, the way that their life is now, because when you say don't care, I'm guessing some people might hear that and be like, well, of course I care. I went through all the trouble of finding a therapist and going to therapy, right? Right. So what's an indicator of that? Like, you don't care.
No, really good point. I think the key word I said is not care. They don't care enough. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. And because we do, there's a lot. Just to get into that first session, we've talked about in other podcasts, is really hard.
Yes.
A lot of anxiety, apprehension, intrepidation, any other word that ends in shun, that's bad. Yeah. So we overcome all of that. And we don't want to suggest people don't care. It's just that point of resistance where it's going to cost me more.
Sure.
Now I don't know if I care enough.
Sure, now that I know what might be required of me, I'm like, well, maybe I am okay with how things are.
Yeah. I might have to confront something in my past.
Like Jim Gaffigan famously joked, what did he say? He's like, sometimes I go through stages of, I'm going to go to the gym every day, right? And then the next day he's like, I'm going to go to the gym a couple times a week. And then the third day he's like, I'm fine with how I look. Right. So it's like once the rubber meets the road, it's kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm maybe good the way I am.
I've heard that Gaffigan joke, and it's so spot on because it's how we all think, and that's why we laugh and find it funny. And it's not that we don't care; we just don't care enough.
Okay,
and
perfect.
I equate it to just it's like you see the person who goes to the gym, who's got their great workout in, or they got their great workout clothes on, I should say, and they're walking around and they're pumping hands and working the crowd. They might actually get on one machine for about 5 minutes and they got their water bottle and then they go home and they say, well, I went to the gym, but in working out, there's always that point of resistance.
Sure.
And people can say, well, I went to the gym, but not to the point of overcoming and leaning into that resistance.
Yep.
So it's not that people don't care. We just don't care enough because that sense of resistance and discomfort is pretty overwhelming. And it makes sense.
For sure. Yep.
So that's one of them.
Okay.
I think another one is a closed posture.
Okay.
A closed posture towards therapy.
So not a physical posture.
Yeah, we know what a physical posture looks like when we're closed.
Your arms are crossed, you're kind of leaned back.
Yeah, and you make that face you're making right now.
An extreme frown.
Your furrow is burrowed.
Think about Grumpy Cat, if you've ever seen that meme. Grumpy Cat meme.
I've never seen that. But
it's a cat that looks like it's frowning really hard. Okay. But it's like just how the cat's face looks.
All good indications of physically being closed off.
Okay. So
now,
what is it?
Emotionally is what we're talking about. We kind of emotionally close off or we emotionally shut down. What do you think that would look like in therapy?
Gosh. Kind of like shutting down maybe. Not saying much, kind of just sitting there.
Right. Yeah. Not saying much.
Giving minimal answers. Or going on lots of rabbit trails. Ooh, not staying on topic.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
That's because it can look like, kind of like the gym analogy, it can look like I'm all in.
Yes.
Because I'm talking about all sorts of things, but I'm not talking about the thing that I need to be talking about. And that can be a form of resistance. It's just simply more passive aggressive.
It is, and I think that one's hard to catch because it might seem like there's a lot of relevant topics being brought up, but I think the kind of not being willing to focus in on one specific thing is really a way of resisting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, or maybe not wanting to establish a specific goal is also
right. And I think it's a form of self-deception. I don't think people are consciously saying, I'm going to go to therapy and not talk about anything really relevant.
Yep. Agreed.
It's just sort of like unconscious, subconsciously, that's where we go because we're really avoiding what we need to talk about.
Right.
So another form of willfulness or resistance that inevitably can come up in therapy is being judgmental.
Ooh. Okay.
So we can be judgmental externally and internally. I can be externally towards other people. I can be judgmental towards things that have happened.
Yeah.
We've talked about the S word, the should.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I can be very judgmental towards people and things that have happened to me and say that should never have happened. And we want to validate that what happened was wrong. It was traumatic. It was abusive. It was hurtful.
Yeah.
And when we get into staying stuck on that, for instance, and shooting on what happened and really basically saying to reality, you should be different.
Yes.
Or you should have been different.
Yep.
And we hold on to that.
Yeah.
Now we're resisting. We're being willful. What are we being willful towards? We're being willful towards accepting reality for the way it is.
I'm trying to think of an example how this would come up. So like, okay, let's say I'm someone who my goal is I want to go to the gym more.
Yes.
So would a judgmental a statement like you're saying be, well, I don't want to be one of those uptight people that gets up in 5 a.m. and goes every single day to the gym.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah, that can be one.
Because that's a judgment about people who work out a lot.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Or, I don't want to be those people that are just so obsessed
with themselves.
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
And so we can do that. We can do that towards the abuse that we've experienced in our life and say, that should never have happened. And
or
and
like,
I'm just not
athletic enough.
Right.
Is that another statement like self-judgment of like, well, I want to work out more, but I'm just not a natural athlete.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I like examples.
And I do too. I'm glad you're bringing those up.
Perfect.
Actually.
Okay. So being judgmental. Yep.
When we are judgmental, what happens is we're operating in the land of the shoulds.
Yes.
Okay. And so when we operate there, we're really shutting others down. We're shutting reality out because reality is this happened.
Right. A fact.
And it was awful. You could say it was even evil. Hurtful and abusive. Absolutely. And we can say that was wrong.
Yep.
And if we're still holding on and saying it should not be this way today, what we're essentially doing is we're rejecting reality.
Okay. Your point being, you're right, it was horrible and it did happen.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. It did happen. And so what we say in dialectical behavioral therapy is we may not have caused what happened to us, and it's our responsibility of how we're going to respond to it. And in order to respond to reality, I have to accept it. The difficulty is it feels like accepting it means I approve of it, and that's not it at all. We don't approve. We never approve evil. We don't approve abuse. We don't approve violent and hurtful behaviors by others. Right. We don't approve it. We can validate, or another word is just acknowledge, yes, this happened and it sucks and it's wrong.
Yep.
And by acknowledging it, we're sort of embracing reality instead of still insisting that reality should be different.
Oh, I love that. Because think about all the different ways we do this. I think I'm thinking of myself, just it could be anything. You can literally take anything that happens and say, so-and-so shouldn't have done that. So-and-so shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have. And it's like, okay, that takes a lot of energy to constantly be saying that to yourself, even if you're not really aware you're saying that to yourself. Because it's just like you're not accepting what is.
We do it all the time. On traumatic levels, understandably. We do it on everyday trivial matters. Yesterday, told you I've been taking Dr. Blackburn's advice and paring back on my Tylenol PMs because we did 2 episodes on
Everybody go back
sleep.
and listen. They're so good.
So good. We're going to have Dr. Blackburn on again. Yeah.
Yes. But okay, so. Yep.
So I stopped taking, I was dog tired yesterday, as I am today, and because I'm not taking my Tylenol PMs. And so excited. I had a book I was carrying into the office. And on top of that, I was excited because I had my coffee.
Oh, boy.
And I'm taking my little lanyard badge to get into the door. And I accidentally turned my book and my coffee slid and fell and it went and spilled all over on the carpet.
Oh, no.
And I can't remember exactly what word I used to describe my frustration there. I don't know. You can imagine.
Yeah.
And so, but what am I doing? I'm objecting to reality and saying, this should not be this way.
Oh, yeah.
And I could have held on to that all day if I wanted and still moped around and said, that should never have happened. Well, gravity sucks,
Well, right. And if you hadn't been aware of what you were doing right there, you might have hung on to it all day.
I could have.
Yeah.
Right.
And not even be aware that, because if you let that kind of ruin your day, that's a way of sort of not letting it go, not acknowledging this happened.
I'm still kind of living back in what happened at 8:00.
Exactly.
And that's what we do. We all can do this with what happened that might have been traumatic and abusive in our past. And it hurts so much. And we still say that should never have happened.
Yep.
And that prevents us from accepting the reality that it did. We're not approving of it. I didn't approve of my coffee, my beloved coffee, falling out.
Frankly, I don't approve of that either.
Yeah, that's...
in hindsight?
Right. So, but it's just a simple metaphor for how judgmentalism happens. And then like we can be that way externally, we can be that way ourselves. I should be different.
Yep.
And so I've talked about this before in another podcast, like the typical kind of behavior chain is that our thoughts and feelings and urges and behavior kind of flow. And so we have a thought of should.
Yep.
Should leads to shame and indignation and things like that. And then I shut down and I shut others out. And so what are we doing? We're shutting out reality. Keeps us from moving forward, keeps us from change, which is what therapy is really about. So what we're trying to do is empower people to be the best version of themselves.
Yep.
And we're trying to highlight, hey, just notice this judgmentalism that you're doing towards yourself and towards reality.
Yep.
That's getting in the way. And sometimes just helping people realize that is so empowering. Like, yeah, that is, I'm stuck. I'm not moving forward because I just feel I have to hold on to this.
So I have a quick tie-in for those listeners who are interested or in recovery. So this is, the saying, the first step is admitting there's a problem.
Yes.
So that's step 1 of the 12 steps is we admitted we were powerless over blah, 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 and that our lives had become unmanageable. So again, the wisdom in here is before you can move forward, you have to admit it first. Like you have to be in reality.
Right. Yeah.
You have to accept that what's going on is keeping you stuck, right? Yeah. So
right. And we'll talk about how do we get beyond that when we move into how do we move from willfulness to willingness.
Love it.
But let's give a couple other examples, I should say. One is where we shift responsibility and blame other people.
Yep.
And that's kind of, they should have known better. They should not have done that.
Yep.
And there might be a lot of truth in that. That's not helping me move forward.
Yep.
The other side of that coin is we accept too much responsibility ourselves for things that are not really ours. Okay. Yep. So everyone kind of has their own load to bear, their own responsibilities to manage. And when we're in high emotion and we're being resistant to therapy, we tend to blame and throw stones at others, or we manipulate others like to carry out or to carry our load.
Okay.
Or we can complain about our load all the time. It shouldn't be so heavy.
This is just too much.
Too much.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I think another form of this is we try to control or change only what is outside of our control, if anything. And so, again, it's kind of keeping the spotlight off of ourselves.
Yes. I have a good example of this.
Yes.
So that would be like, let's say that I'm chronically sort of lonely and I feel isolated. Okay. That's like me saying, well, another weekend came and went and nobody reached out to me.
Oh, I love that example.
Right? Yes. Because it's like that it's deceiving because it's like, oh man, the temptation is to be like, oh man, that's a bummer. Like why won't people reach out? Right. But really, did I reach out to anyone? Right? So that's the part I can control is instead of focusing on all the people that didn't reach out to me, how many people did I reach out to? Right?
Right. Yeah. Keeping the spotlight on oneself.
Yep. So willfulness says it's everyone's fault that they didn't reach out to me, right?
Yes.
And then maybe more willingness is like, well, I guess I could probably reach out to some people.
I have some responsibility.
There you go.
Here.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have some locus of control internally.
Yep.
What am I going to do about this? I remember one client I had, he kind of came in like that all the time. Really liked the guy a lot. And so I would continually validate and say, wow, yeah, that really blows. I hate that. For you, that sucks.
Yep.
And just sort of take a deep breath and sit with him in that frustration and pain. And then I'd say, so what do you think you want to do about that? And I mean, we probably had 10 sessions in a row. And he would come in and he would talk about, what's unfair and things and kind of like life should be better. And then he would say, and I know what you're going to say. You're going to ask me something. And I said, oh, what am I going to ask you? And he said, you're going to ask me, what am I going to do about it? And I said, hey, that's a really good question. What are you going to do about that? And so it's not like we're trying to play games or anything, but we want to empower that, hey, you actually can do something about this.
Yes. I love that because, again, I think even when it's outside of a therapy situation, we all have someone in our life where it feels like we just have to offer solutions. Like you could have totally, in that situation, you could have tried to fix it for him, right? And again, you know better, but I don't think we're taught this skill really. And so I think a lot of people would be like, well, I keep trying to tell them what to, solutions and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, you just kind of sat with it.
Right.
And then continued to say like, okay, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I've actually talked about this with other therapists, and they kind of objected like, well, what's your intervention? What's your treatment intervention? And
I love this.
I don't want to minimize treatment interventions, but I think it really betrays what you're talking about is I can do that.
Sure.
And that's easy.
Yes.
I can provide that. I can provide psychoeducation.
Problem solving. Pros and cons.
Love to teach. But I'm fostering then a dependence on me.
Right.
And I can tell them what to do. Okay. But that doesn't really address the problem that people don't want to change.
So you picked that out. So I think that's the important part here is you were able to identify the willfulness happening. And that's why it wasn't appropriate for you to just jump into an intervention. Right? So that's the difference.
And if there's one thing people hate more than change, is being told how to change.
Yes, especially if they don't want to.
Exactly.
They get irritated.
Okay, so now you're trying to control me, and then you're like, my therapist is a jerk.
Yeah, and no one understands me.
Right, and maybe it is kind of jerky. If I am, if they're resistant, and I'm trying to jam something down their throat and say, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. Why aren't you doing this? I gave you this homework. I'm shooting all over them now.
Sure.
So it's really important that we understand this. And this is, I think, the essence of empowering people. And it's great because I'm not kidding. The best compliment I had was, this guy's fantastic. He said to me, I just love coming here.
Aww.
And I said, why is that? And he said, because you always give me the best advice.
Yeah.
And I thought,
you were like every therapist is like
the worst thing I could ever hear. And so instead of responding defensively, I said, thanks for telling me that. So what advice do I give you then?
Nice.
And he paused and he said, actually, I can't think of advice you've ever given me. And I said, thank you.
You're like,
I feel so much better.
Whew, close call.
And that's what empowerment is.
Yes.
He was feeling empowered.
Right.
And was appreciative that, hey, you know what? I have more power over my life. And this is great. This is freedom. Yep. And I mean, I would do this for free.
Yep.
If I could, because it's intrinsically valuable to see that change happen in people's lives.
Yes. I love that.
So let's maybe think about willingness. Okay. And how do we get over this? It's actually, I think it's pretty simple. We talked about this at my staff meeting about, all right, so how do we overcome resistance? And I think of a question that I like to ask people is, okay, yeah, it makes sense. You don't want to change. This is scary. This is a lot of work. I want to validate whatever it is that is impeding their progress and why they're holding on to willfulness. So I want to validate that. And then I'll say, so what do you think is the threat of change?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. What's the threat of really embracing this change? Or another way to think about it is the other side of that coin is, what's the benefit of staying the same?
There you go.
Or what's the utility of continually doing what you're doing? Because we're doing this for a reason, right? I don't go to the gym to work out for a reason that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. And I think it points out that people might not even realize, and this applies to me just as much too, that they are perceiving change as a threat. They might not, again, that's like subconscious, right? Like, I think a lot of people would object to that and be like, of course I want to change, right? But by saying, what's the threat of change? They're like, what am I afraid of? Yep.
I see this a lot when people have, maybe they're at about 6 months sobriety. And there's kind of this ambivalence towards pursuing sobriety anymore. And here's why. And I like to ask, well, what's the threat of continually pursuing sobriety? And essentially what I hear a lot is people will say, kind of like the devil you know is not as bad as the devil you don't. And so in other words,
It's familiar.
Sobriety for the rest of my life, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know the rules. I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before.
Absolutely.
And that's scary to me. Whereas, you know what? I do know how to live addicted. I know the rules. I'm comfortable with that. I'm actually kind of good. I'm adept and competent there, where sobriety can feel very incompetent, and that's the threat.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of utility in just staying in the land of familiarity. And it makes sense.
Yep. It's like writing with your non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
It's like you can do it. It's just really difficult. And awkward and uncomfortable.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
You're so good with the examples.
Oh, thank you.
Today. Yeah. I want to validate those groups.
You are validating my example giving.
So, I don't want to be overly simplistic, but this is what my go-to that has really worked 100% of the time. What's the threat of change? Now, we've come up against this.
Yep.
This is scary. A lot of pushback. What's the threat?
Right.
Of change? In other words, what's the benefit of staying the same? Because it makes sense. And so if we can validate the threat, validate the benefit, then we can ask ourselves, I'll have people tell me what the threat is. And they'll say, well, if I do this, then this or that or the other thing will happen. And I'll say, sure. Yeah, you're right. And if you don't, then you remain where you're at. And what do you want to do?
Again, putting it in there, they can be the ones to decide.
Yeah. What do you want to do? I'm happy to help empower you toward whatever you want. What do you want to do? And I don't take it personally if a client says, yeah, I don't know if I want to come in anymore. Okay, it's your life. You get to decide how you want to live it.
Sure.
And I want to empower you as best I can.
Yep.
To become the best
version of yourself.
Yes. So that's why I love our mission statement. And I think it's very consistent with what good therapy is really about. And I really hope that people listening can realize, you know what? It's okay that I'm resistant to change in my life. That's human. That's normal.
Again, validating.
Yes.
Validating why someone might be resistant.
Yeah,
it's like,
totally.
It's scary. It's new. It's uncharted territory, right?
Lots of reasons why lots of good reasons, understandable, that we don't want to change.
Yep.
And hopefully by just asking, what's the threat? What is the threat to change? Or what's the benefit of staying the same? I encourage people to think about that, because oftentimes it takes some introspection, some deep thought, and maybe some journaling to understand that. But what's cool is when people can identify that, it is so empowering to help them to move towards change, or empowering to say, you know what, I don't think I want to, or now's not the right time.
Yeah, maybe it's a time thing. Yeah.
Well, speaking of time.
Thank you, Brett, for taking us through this topic. I think it's a really good one, and I can't wait to circle back sometime and talk about willingness.
I am very willing to do that. Yes.
Oh, good. We're off to a good start. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on Psyched for Psychology, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.